In the last episode, we talked about IP addresses. Like your home address, every device on a computer network has a unique IP address, and it's used to locate your device and deliver data to you. The problem with IP addresses is how they look. I mean, look at this. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. And it's a little hard to remember. Was this your favorite website? Or wait, was it this one? IP addresses are fantastic for computers, not so great for people. They're hard to memorize, hard to distinguish, and unless it belongs to you, meaningless. We need to replace the IP address with a word that's easy to remember. Think of a Rolodex. Wait, no, nobody will get that reference. Think of a phone book. No, that's not any better. Think of the contacts on your smartphone. All of your friends' names are in there, and they all have a phone number. You don't have to memorize all of their phone numbers, you just look up their name to find their number, and if the number changes, the entry is updated since the name stays the same. They could even have multiple phone numbers. That's what we do with IP addresses. We identify a word or phrase and map it to an IP address. We call this the domain name system, or DNS for short. And every time you or an app on your laptop or phone tries to access a website or some data, chances are it's using a domain name, not an IP address. But we still need that IP address. We spent the entirety of the previous episode talking about how important those addresses are. So how do we get those addresses? Well, the app makes what's called a DNS request. It asks a DNS server, using its IP address, about a domain. And the DNS server responds with the IP address of that domain. It's as simple as that. These DNS servers maintain the mapping of thousands of domain names and their addresses, just like the Contacts app or address book on your phone. How do we ensure that everyone has the same mappings? Well, remember our friends over at ICANN? Not only do they control global IP address allocation, they also keep things fair and square for domains. But if you're looking to purchase a domain, you don't buy them directly from ICANN, but from a domain name registrar such as Namecheap, Bluehost, DreamHost, or GoDaddy. Since domain names must be unique, if someone already owns the domain you want, you either buy it from the owner or you get creative. The fitness company Peloton, for example, does not own Peloton.com, which is instead a company developing software for oil and gas customers. Instead, they use onepeloton.com. Or there's a third option. You wait for the domain you want to expire. Domain name purchases are only valid for a few years, and so they must be periodically renewed. And while prices are generally very low, they can vary greatly with demand. Unknown domains can go for as low as $10 a year, while popular domains such as voice.com sold for $30 million in 2019. Domain names are further distinguished with what's called a top-level domain, or TLD. This is that last little bit of a domain after the period. These were originally intended to identify what kind of website you were visiting. Originally, there were 6 top-level domains, and they all had a specific purpose. .com was intended for businesses and commercial organizations. However, now it is the most generic and general-purpose top-level domain. .edu can be used by educational institutions, schools, universities, and sometimes libraries. Though originally intended for any kind of government agency or office, only US-based government entities may register .gov domain names. And like .gov, .mil is designated for the US Department of Defense. .net was intended to be used by organizations involved in networking technologies like ISPs and other communications infrastructure companies. And finally, the catch-all .org. This was for miscellaneous organizations that didn't fit anywhere else. These days, it's usually used by nonprofit organizations, open source projects, and communities. Pretty quickly, it was realized that in order to avoid scams, governments needed their own top-level domain. So country code TLDs were created for and then operated by the government. For example, co.uk for the United Kingdom, .de for Germany, .jp for Japan, and so forth. Over the years, new TLDs have been released by ICANN, providing further possibilities for businesses, organizations, and governments to have their own unique place on the internet. There are now well over 1,500 TLDs available. Just because a domain uses a country code TLD, however, does not necessarily mean that government runs it. Governments are free to sell domain names with their TLD for profit. The small country of Montenegro owns the TLD .me, which quickly grew in popularity for its ability to be used as a domain hack, turning the full domain name into a company's name or catchphrase, such as Meet Me or Lime. The small island nation of Tuvalu owns the lucrative .tv domain used by many sites which have nothing to do with the country of Tuvalu for obvious reasons. And in fact, selling or auctioning domains with the country code top-level domain has turned into a significant source of income for some countries. Anguilla, a tiny Caribbean nation half the size of Washington, D.C., was assigned their top-level domain in the 1990s, when the internet was still a mere curiosity to most people. It took years, but little did they know the gold that they struck when in 2022, a little-known company released a product called ChatGPT and set the world scrambling to purchase domain names with the coveted top-level domain .ai. Anguilla's domain revenue is expected to be over $30 million in 2023, which would be over 10% of its GDP. To summarize, IP addresses are great for computers to navigate the internet. But domain names are far more convenient for humans. And although the top-level domains were originally meant to identify the kind of website you were visiting, these days they're mostly cosmetic.